All right, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to go over a mono red deck because there's always a red deck in standard, or at least there seems to be. This time though, we'll see how this looks different and you'd be surprised. We're not putting a lot of new cards into it. All right, now here we are taking a look at the mono red deck and it looks pretty much how you expect it to. We kind of load up on the low end and really are going heavy on 4 Embercleaves in this list. Now, going down your creature choices, we're obviously going to go ahead and play the Fervent Champ because it's great. First strikes, does everything you need it to do for 1 mana. Grim Initiate is kind of the interesting one here. I think one of the things about this card that people forget is that it has First Strike, which is really good, especially when you see how we're building the rest of the deck this go round. And then it also has the ability to kind of replace itself whenever it dies, or if you get it in multiples and they die, you actually end up with a bigger creature than you had before. So this protects you a little bit from sweepers, also can let you attack in a little recklessly, knowing that you're going to lose a creature. The only creature I'm not a big fan of in this list is the Weaselback Redcap. And it's not bad, and it mostly is here because it's a knight and it gets a benefit from the Fervent Champ's ability when it attacks. However, you could go with the Goblin Banneret, which actually has Mentor and can pump for the same cost and has otherwise the same ability. So it's kind of a judgment call on what you want to fill with that slot. It makes sense to want to go ahead and get the freebie, but at the same time, when you pump the Banneret with Mentor, it does permanently give another creature +1/+1. So that's totally up to you. I went the Weasel with the Weaselback in this list. We are playing Bargain in this list, which is awesome. Gives a creature +2/+2, but the other benefit is all non-humans that are attacking get trample. The cool part is almost everything's a non-human except for the Fervent Champion, I believe. So everybody's getting to trample, which is great when you have a bunch of 3 and 4 power creatures because of stuff like Bargain and Infuriate, which we're also playing. So Infuriate gives a creature +3/+2. And the cool part is Infuriate doesn't have any other things attached to it that make it a problem. So you can use it on attack or defense. You can use it as a combo trick anywhere. Whenever somebody goes to give something a negative power, you can use it to keep a creature alive. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with this card. And it is a neat finisher. In some ways, it's almost like the lightning bolt of the deck, the way the deck plays. Rimrock Knight, you've seen a lot of lists lately. It gives your creature +2/+0. And it's a 3/1. However, it can't block, but that's okay. That's not what this deck wants to do anyway. This is just the big beater of the deck. I mean, you can easily get a Runaway Steamkin on turn 2. You can get it up to, sometimes up to a 4/4 on turn 3, and you can use multiple abilities. There's a lot of things I've seen happen where you play a turn 1 creature, turn 2 Runaway Steamkin, you play a land, you attack, you pump a couple things. You may or may not have an Embercleave you could use. You know, there's a lot of interesting things. There's going to be times too during combat where you're going to play a pump ability that gives you the last counter you need on the Runaway Steamkin, and then you can remove the counters to go ahead and play an Embercleave or to play 2 more combat tricks. So that's really cool. Or even post combat, being able to remove some counters, get extra mana, use something like a Light Up the Stage, and then still have other cool combat tricks. This is the one new card we decided to add, which was Phoenix of Ash. And it fills a couple of spots here. The first is that it's a flyer. So not only that, I guess it's a flyer with haste, which is also really good. So it gives you another way to attack as they're gumming up the ground and blocking some of your smaller creatures. It also gives you some longevity and some reach, where as the game extends, you can remove all those little creatures that you lost or those spells you played from the graveyard and get back a 3/3 hasty flyer. So if they were to sweep the board, you could just pay, get it out of your yard. Now you're hitting again for 3 immediately. And it allows you to keep pushing the pressure on the opponent so they eventually have to do something other than just sitting and slowly building up. I mean, this is the type of deck that wants to lean forward as hard as it can. Of course, Light Up the Stage, that's going to be a fixture in every red aggressive deck from probably here till eternity. The card's just great. You deal your damage, you get to look at extra cards. It lets you guarantee your land drops a little better, let you find more damage, just like lots of things this card does for you. And sometimes you just play it by itself for 3, and that's fine too. We did only go with 3 Bone Crusher Giants here because we're playing a little bit land light, but we did include the Giants just because we wanted a little bit of extra damage. Sometimes you just need to get a defender out of the way. Sometimes you just need to hit your opponent when they're at that 3 to 5 life point. Just little things it does for you, and it is a sizable body. It allows you to get another 4/3 creature into play. And sometimes because you're playing something like Bargen, that's all you need, and that gives you enough to trample through and win. So it's not a lot, but it's just enough to kind of push you over the edge, and it's easy to cast. And then, of course, for Ember Cleaves, because Ember Cleaves is a fantastic card. Again, if you can get a 3 or 4 power creature, you can get an Ember Cleave in that just ends the game after you've done a lot, not even a lot, just a little bit of early attacking, which is huge. The land, we went very, very, very simple. We're just playing 19 land, so it's 15 mountains, 4 castle Embereth. And this is simply because we got the cost of the cards down in the deck as low as possible. The only real expensive card is Embercleave, but you're not looking to play Embercleave for 6 anyway. You're usually trying to play it for 3 and at most 4 mana. So not a big deal, and you almost always have the mana to be able to activate Castle Embereth and often do one additional thing, which is really good. So as you're talking about getting those little points of damage in and nickel and diming your opponent, that's the way you want to do it. The sideboard, we didn't try to get too tricky here. We're playing a couple of Claim the Firstborns. This is a way to get Rotting Registors out of the way or some big life gainer that's causing you problems. You can go ahead and use that, and it kind of sets up a finishing turn, which is pretty cool. Ember Shieldbreakers, still have to play these because, the Cat Oven decks are still a problem, and you want to be able to get those out of the way. Fries, we're playing a couple. It's arguable, depending on what your metagame looks like, you might find space for a third or maybe even a fourth Fry. It's good against the Selesnya enchantment decks. It's good against some of the various blue control decks because it lets you hit their planeswalkers. So there's a lot going on with this card now that there wasn't before. So it's really something to consider. Unclaimed Berserker. This is a card you don't see a lot of, but I do really, really like it in this list. It's only a 1/1, but it has protection from white, which lets you punch through so many of these white life gain decks. Some of these white-green, Selesnya enchantment decks. It's really good against those. And again, it's that 3 power attacker that lets you just keep pushing the issue. And if your opponent can't block it, then you can just double up all your pump spells on it and really go over the top. A card we're trying out here is Mizzium Tank. And this is mostly because if the games get to where you're playing a long game and they're playing a bunch of sweepers, like this lets you still play a spell, activate this, and then keep moving forward. So, the only downside is you do sometimes have to have another creature out, which is a little tough because it allows you to. Most of the spells we're playing, I guess, actually are enhancements to other creatures. They're not just spells you play on their own. Though there are some scenarios where you may just play like a light up the stage or something and then activate your Mizzium Tank and really just go for it. Like it's really, really cool, and it gets a bonus and gets to attack. So there's a few things happening there with it. Still a little bit of experimental card, but it's really cool to have something that lets you play after they sweep the board. And then same thing for those longer games, we're going with Chandra Fire Artisan. It's a card I think that kind of gets forgotten a little bit. But if you're playing against a slower deck, it lets you draw more cards, which you can almost always cast because they're so cheap. So you can almost get to play 2 cards a turn potentially. Or those turns where you're drawing land, you can actually kind of push through them and not get stuck for so much. And then if they decide to attack Chandra or let her sit there, either or, it's to your benefit, you get to do more damage to the opponent. Yes, there are things now that people are playing, like Banishing Light and whatever that can remove it, but technically that can remove any card, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. This is just a really good opportunity, I think, to actually slide Chandra into play when you normally would have to kind of toss this card to the wayside and not really get to use it because the format's too fast. But yeah, overall, if you're looking for a red deck, this is probably the most solid version I have right now. I think the Phoenix of Ash fits in there perfectly, and I think we found some spots where we've been able to build out the sideboard a little bit. It's arguable depending on what you're playing against. Maybe you want more Claim the Firstborn. Maybe you want more Fries in the sideboard. I think that's just going to be a personal situation depending on what you're playing against and what your metagame looks like. But if you want something that's also very cheap to build, this is the deck I would go with. There's I mean, you're playing Embercleave, and that is an expensive card, but honestly, Embercleave goes in a lot of aggressive red decks right now. So it's not like it's money poorly spent. You can definitely transfer it to another deck. But across the board, everything else is fairly cheap in this list, even your sideboard cards. And your mana base is cheap because you're playing mostly mountains. So I would definitely look at this. If you want to even just have a second or a third deck in your arsenal to play around with to switch it up, maybe have a deck for friends to play if they show up to your FNM with you and they don't have a deck, this is one you can definitely build. It's pretty quick to learn and easy to understand, and it's not going to hurt your pocketbook. So yeah, if you're looking to play red deck in the Theros standard, at least early on, this is one version I would look at. Anyway, that's all I got this week. See you next time.